This week's assignment is transforming everyday objects. So I want you to look at these images on this first screen just for a minute and notice that all of them represent or are created from everyday objects. Now, all of these are very famous works of art created in different years. So the one question that I'd like you to think about throughout this is, what is art? And then the second question I have for you is, what is appropriation? And then looking at this image in front of you, how much do you think it costs? And then, is it art? Why or why not? So if you guessed $3 million, you were correct. Now, why is this Brillo box, which looks like your standard Brillo box, worth $3 million? Well, when I go to look up a box currently today, I see that I can buy the box for $6.88. So I'm very unclear as to why this box is worth $3 million. This is an example of appropriation in art. And this particular Brillo box that you are looking at was created by the famous artist Andy Warhol. There's actually a full documentary on the history of this particular Brillo box that was created by HBO and documents the travels of this Brillo box, which was originally purchased for $1,000 and eventually just sold in recent years for $3 million. So what is appropriation? Well, appropriation in art refers to the practice of artists using pre-existing objects or images in their art with very little transformation of the original. That means borrowing, copying, and altering images and objects that already exist. In this example that you just saw, Andy Warhol took the standard Brillo box of the time and screen printed it on boxes. He then claimed these artworks as his own unique pieces. Recently, another conceptual art example was big in the news. You may remember this piece that was going viral very recently in 2019, and this was called Comedian, created by Mauricio Catalan. This banana duct taped to the wall was featured at Miami Art Basel, and this other artist that you see eating the banana actually called this a performance art piece. His name is David DeTuna, called Hungry Artist. So what is conceptual art? Well, that is art in which the idea presented by the artist is considered more important than the finished product, if there is one. So it's more about the action and process than the final product of art, which in this example would be the banana taped to the wall. Now, there's another piece of art that actually probably started all of these movements, which is called the ready-made. And this was a term coined by Marcel Duchamp in 1916 to describe prefabricated, mass-produced objects isolated from their intended use and elevated to the status of art by the artist choosing and designating them as such. Here is the artist Marcel Duchamp sitting with one of his famous pieces, a stool and a bicycle wheel. And then another one of his famous pieces, which is probably most associated with the term ready-made, is this urinal flipped on its side and signed R. Mutt. Marcel Duchamp inspired many artists for years to come to force us to question what is actually art and what is considered art. Who considers originality, authorship, authenticity? And this is an example of a lobster phone that was created by the famous artist Salvador Dali. Other artists also played around with different objects as art. This one was created by the artist Robert Rauschenberg. He called this a combine. He actually took his pillow and his bed quilt and put some paint on it. And this is sitting in a famous museum. There's lots of artists that have been inspired by everyday objects, including Klaus Oldenburg. He has very large size sculptures of everyday objects in different cities throughout the world. And of course, we saw Andy Warhol's example of the Brillo box, and Mauricio Catalan, who did the taped banana to the wall, which was entitled Comedian. That was not his first time doing so. In 1999, he actually taped a gallerist up to the wall for the whole 2 hours of the opening exhibition. And additionally, he had a gold toilet in reference definitely to Marcel Duchamp's urinal that was actually available for use at the Guggenheim Museum and eventually was stolen and put on display in London as well. So many artists play around with this notion of what is art and who considers art. So Jeff Koons is another very famous artist playing around with the notion of what is art and has definitely forced people to consider what is art and has people spending lots and lots of money for these so-called works of art. But does anything stand out to you about all of these artists that I just mentioned? Well, they are all male, so I was curious to see if there were females creating ready-made works as well. As we know, previously females weren't encouraged to be artists, so I'm sure there are many more examples that were never brought to the public eye, but this is one example by a female artist named Merritt Oppenheim. She was making fur bracelets at the time for extra money, made a joke to her friend Pablo Picasso about the bracelets. He said that anything could be covered with the fur and be art, and so she jokingly covered a teacup, spoon, and plate. And this became a famous work of art in the Surrealist movement. Additionally, I found out that Elsa von Freytag Lorenhoven was a ready-made artist, but she is questionably the true creator of the Marcel Duchamp piece, the urinal piece that was featured. She actually might be the original creator of that idea. So there is some question as to whether or not this was his idea or he just submitted it or if it was her idea. And there's lots of little podcasts and articles about that if you're interested in learning more. So regardless of who the true creator of this ready-made piece was, some point, I thought this was a funny little comic. At some point, it was just an object, and then someone designated it as art, and now we see that is placed in museums, art museums, very prolific and famous art museums throughout the world. So it raises this question of art or prank and how people interact with objects. At the San Fran Museum of Modern Art, interestingly enough, some teenagers your age actually were looking at some pieces and thought, what in the world, I could do that, and did a little social experiment, put their glasses on the ground, and soon people started forming crowds around it, thinking that it was a piece associated with the museum. It really makes you think about what is art and why do we consider something to have value, and can jokes actually reveal something about the art? So for your project this week, I want you to create your own ready-made or conceptual work of art. I want you to search the current space that you're in for everyday objects, and then use your creativity and have fun creating your own ready-made or conceptual work of art. Photograph your masterpiece, and then if you wish to give your everyday object a transformation more like that of a sculpture of Claes Oldenburg, you can use Snapseed to do a double exposure, which I'll show you what that might look like in just a minute. And then you will upload your work of art to the shared Google Slide presentation. Note the title, artist, date, and location, and I'll show you an example of that. And then be ready to share your ready-made or conceptual work of art during our Zoom meeting on Thursday, May 7th. So here's my first example, inspired by Duchamp's stool with the bicycle wheel. And on my piece, this is how I would submit it. Okay, so I titled this piece Lights, Camera, Ready Made. Put the artist, myself, which you'll all be putting yourself as the artist. The date, which is April 2020. And then location, I made up this location and you're more than welcome to use it. East Village Middle College High School Museum of Art and Design in San Diego, California. For my creation of this piece, the objects that I chose were a stool, a candle, and a Polaroid camera. I did another example, this one inspired by Mauricio Catalan's comedian. I titled it When Life Gives You Lemons. I again am the artist, April 2020, and then same location. Now, if you wanted to do something more like Claes Oldenburg, where he has these massive oversized regular object sculptures, you could double expose an object that you photograph in. So here I took a photo of the Embarcadero, and I just got that off Google Images, and then I took a photo of a sand dollar that I had at my house. Thinking about how I could make that a sculpture, I double exposed it in. I did the same thing with taking a picture of a couple pair of batteries that I had to make them look like they're larger than life sculptures. Now, if you do this, you would do the same thing as far as giving it a title and the artist, and then of course the location should be wherever the background is that you choose. So for this one, I titled it Sand Dollar by the Sea. Again, myself as the artist, the date, and the location for this one, the Embarcadero in San Diego. So this project of your ready-made conceptual work of art is due Wednesday, May 6th by 9 a.m. You should enter your piece into the shared Google Slide presentation with your artist name, the date, and location, and then be ready to share and explain your design at our next Zoom meeting on Thursday, May 7th. Additionally, this week you are required to watch 2 videos on Edpuzzle. The first video is Art or Prank, and the second video is Transforming Everyday Objects. This will go into some deeper understanding and meaning of the art history associated with the pieces that you saw in this presentation. As always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. And I look forward to seeing your ready-made and conceptual works of art on Thursday.